Hello everyone, today we're going to be taking our first look at the Advanced Configurator for Revenue Cloud. What is the Advanced Configurator? It's the next-gen configuration engine built for Revenue Cloud. You will build rules using the Constraint Modeling Language that lets you describe rules once, and the engine then finds a valid build automatically. You will also get a visual Constraint Builder UI for admins and business users, so you can either go with code or no code, depending on the type of rules that you're looking to build. General availability should be coming out with summer 25 release of Revenue Cloud. It will initially coexist with the standard configurator, but it is meant to ultimately replace it. So you will have to eventually migrate your configuration rules to the advanced configurator. That ultimately gives you a lot more power on configuration. What are the key advantages of the advanced configurator? Performance is one of them. So it offers sub-second solves for 10,000 plus line item quotes, so faster quoting. It also does bi-directional constraints, so you don't need to write forward and reverse rules like we're used to with either manage package CPQ or the current configuration rules, right? So if you want product X to auto-select product Y currently and the other way around, well, currently you need to write two rules. Now with the constraint engine, you can simply write that as one line or one rule, and it's going to handle both selection and deselection of product. So you don't have as many rules to maintain. Scalability, it's much better also, so performance goes up based on your usage. The admin UX, again, will give you point and click for common constraints that you're looking to build. So it should make authoring time a lot easier. And it is also very extensible, so you can use mat expressions, regex, lambda expressions, and obviously you're going to be able to use AI to generate some of that in future releases. What rules are available in the advanced configurator? This is not a complete list, but to give you an idea of what you can do. So you can do basic constraints. So if you want to auto-select a product, auto-select an attribute value, you can do that. You can also do conditional constraints. So if you want to set attribute values based on conditions, right? So if X is true, then the attribute Y must be set to a specific value. You can also write preference rules. So if you want to set a preferred value, right? So if I select the 27-inch monitor, then the preferred resolution would be 4K, but it's not enforced. So it's going to select that for the user initially, but then let the user modify that rule afterwards. You can have message rules. So you can have messages that show up within the configurator or in the transaction editor. So if you've got different rules that you're going up against, it can be an info or warning or an error, depending on the type of error that you want to show up in there. And that's going to show up, again, either in the configurator or against a specific quote line. You can have require or exclude rules. So if you want to auto-add components to your bundle when specific conditions are met, or if you want to exclude some specific components in specific conditions, then you can do that. You can also have rules that are going to allow you to either hide attribute values or disable components. So you can do that as well. You can do a table constraint, and we're going to look at an example of what a table constraint is. Table constraint will allow you to build a matrix of allowed attribute combinations, right? So if one of my attributes, so monitor size is 13-inch, then the allowed resolution should be 1080p, for example, so on and so forth for all the different values that you've got available in your table. You can also define quantities for some of your bundle products based on math-driven validation, right? So your software should also always match the number of computers that you're selling in your bundle, right? So you need to sell the same number of licenses as you are selling hardware. You can also do cross-bundle or transaction scope rules. So basically, you can evaluate your quote now with that with the configuration engine, and that's going to allow you to either show up validations in the transaction editor. For example, if discount is too high on one of your products, you could show a validation message within the transaction editor. Will also allow you to do cross-bundle evaluation. So if you're selling a laptop, it should always come with a monitor. So you can do auto-add rules that are going to add that product to your bundle, to your quote rather, automatically. And you can also do rule chaining within this. So you can have multiple constraints that drive one another. So the output of one constraint is going to drive the input of the second constraint, so on and so forth. So you can chain multiple constraints together to make sure that your configuration is as required. Let's now jump into Salesforce and see what it looks like in action. So in Salesforce, I've got my quote with a bundle already added. So the Laptop Pro bundle, it comes with a couple different options. So if we go in our configuration screen, the first thing you'll notice is the configuration screen itself experience, that doesn't change. So you're still using the same components within your configuration screen, and that still looks the same. What really changes is the backend engine that drives the configuration rules and the messaging that you're going to see within that configuration screen. First thing we notice now is we have a message on top. So that's a message that was built in the CML for that specific bundle. So if we look at our laptop option and we go into configuration for the laptop option, we can see that this is a message that's dynamic based on the selection of my storage. Right now it's set to 256 gigabyte, but if I change this over, we'll see that the message is going to update dynamically. So we're concatenating a fixed message with the specific value from that storage option to show a message to our configuration user. Again, this is purely an example, but that's very flexible and you can build complex messaging that's going to be relevant to your users. They're going through configuration. If I select the 2 terabyte, we'll see a different message now. The message is now a warning that the chosen storage is not available and that we should choose a different type of storage, which means that now it's going to let me save my configuration as is, but I won't be able to create an order from this because we have a warning on the quote. So we'll make sure to change this. The other thing that I brought up earlier is the option to have a table of constraints, right? So if my resolution is 1080p, then the screen should be 13-inch. If I change this to the 2K display, my screen size should now be 15-inch. And if I change it to a 4K display, now my screen size is going to go up once this completes to 27-inch. And that's a constraint, so it will not let me go through, right? So if I try to change the screen size to something that's not possible because of that display resolution, we're going to get a message, right? So you're going to surface a message that says this configuration doesn't work. So go back to what should make sense. So we're going to go back to our 4K display with the 27-inch screen. If we look at the configurator, if we select our Core i9 processor in there, we'll now see that the memory also got updated to the 64 gigabytes of memory automatically. So that's the first constraint. So if the processor, and we'll see that in the CML in a second, but if the CPU is Core i9, then memory should be 64 gigabytes. The second constraint I've got, and this is rule chaining in action, is if memory is 64 gigabytes, storage should be 1 terabyte. So we said with one change, we're driving multiple changes downstream. Now, if we go in and we modify our CPU now down to the i7, we're also going to see a different subset of options being selected. So because I have a preference rule on the hard drive being set to 1 terabyte, if my CPU is set to i7, then that got auto-selected. But now this is not a constraint. This is simply a preference rule, so I can change that without getting any errors for my configuration. And this is going to let me keep going through with that current setup in that configuration. Let's go back to our Laptop Pro bundle and look at other options. So if I now add my printer bundle in that nested bundle, and I go in the configuration for my printer, I can see that I've got the option for my printer, which is auto-selected, and then printer accessories, so I can select printer paper. So I'm going to select that now and then go back to our configuration for the printer itself. Now the printer type is set to laser, but if I go in and select the 3D printer, now I make that change, nothing surfaces on there yet, but if I go back to the printer bundle itself, we'll now see that the printer accessory is deselected because we cannot sell printer paper with a 3D printer because they're not required. So if I try to select this again, it's going to get unchecked, excluded, because that configuration does not make sense. Let's go back again to our Laptop Pro bundle. And we can also build rules that affect product classifications, right? So far, I'm looking at product components, so specific components, and that's where the rules are built. But in my software tab here, this is a product classification. So I can add any product that exists within that classification. So if I select QuickBooks Online and I add this to my bundle, now I've got this. And if I go in the configuration for QuickBooks Online, my subscription type is business. So if I select enterprise, now I'll get an error. Only business software products are allowed to be sold within that bundle. And that's going to apply to any product that exists within that classification. So I'll go back to business and now I can hit save and go back to my configuration. So this is what the experience again looks like for the Advanced Configurator when I'm in that configuration screen. So again, no changes to the layout itself, but it does change how dynamic my rules are as I'm going through configuration. Let's now jump over to a different tab to see what that configuration looks like in the Constraint Builder. So this is my Constraint Builder for my Laptop Pro bundle. So again, right now, as of what I have access to, I don't have access to the visual builder for my configuration rules. So what I get is the CML code purely that I have for my Laptop Pro bundle. So what I do in that code, and that's going to remain available when the Visual Builder is available as well. So you're going to be able to do more complex elements of configurations still with code, but also leverage the Visual Builder for simpler rules that can be built in the point and click interface. So in that code there, we can see basically that we're importing our Laptop Pro bundle with all of the related option, right? So my mouse, printer bundle, laptop, the software, and we also see the rules that are being built in that configuration. And then we can see the same thing for all the different options that are within my bundle. So we can create rules at different levels depending on what type of rules I'm trying to create. And I can have rules that apply to different products as well within the same Constraint Builder record. And also we can create virtual quotes to have rules that apply at the quote level. So again, this is simply an intro, so I want to show you what that looks like, and I'm going to do a deep dive on how you can create that constraint builder. So if you'd like to see that, make sure you subscribe to get notified when that releases. But as we're looking through this, we can see the different rules that we were looking at in the configurator as we were going through configuration, right? So we've got our constraint table up here that defines what display resolution comes with different screen sizes that are available within that bundle, right? So as I'm selecting the display resolution or the screen size, I get the other attribute to update dynamically based on my different selections that are available within my matrix. We also have the rule chaining available here, right? So we see that our first constraint that is that if the Core i9 CPU selected, the memory should be set to 64 gigabytes. And also, if my memory is set to 64 gigabytes, then the 1 terabyte hard drive should be selected. So we're seeing two rules that are being chained together. We also can see down here the preference rule where if my CPU is set to to the i7, then storage should be the 2 terabyte hard drive being selected automatically. We can also see the different messages that are being set up and concatenated over here in the codes. This is so you can build all of those rules, and all those will be documented, and I'll make sure to add some of that documentation to our website. So make sure to follow the link in the description if you want to see what that looks like. But that's really meant to be an intro to what you can do in that constraint builder. And now for one last example, so if we're seeing, back on here, we can also bring in tags from our context definitions. For example, here I'm bringing the item discount percentage, and we can see that our message is that if the discount is beyond 10%, do not provide more than 10% for the Laptop Pro bundle. That's going to be a warning against our quote. If I close my configurator, go back here on my bundle, and I go in and I add a 15% discount, and I hit save, we'll see this recalculate, and now we'll get a warning against our quote line item that discount is beyond what's allowable on that product. So we see do not provide more than 10% discount for the Laptop Pro bundle. So this was the last example I wanted to walk through within the Advanced Configurator for Salesforce Revenue Cloud. Again, this was meant as an intro. Please make sure to subscribe if you want to learn more about the Advanced Configurator. I'll make sure to do a deep dive where we go from the start and how you can set it up for a specific product. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you've got any questions, and have a good day.